Hello, welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Rebecca Jorgensen, joined here today with Dr. Sue Johnson. Of course, we all know who you are, Sue. We're so glad to have you. And
You are
please do
most
say
welcome. I'm
hello
happy to
to
be here.
us.
Hi,
Yes, and let's
everybody.
have our, yeah. And we'll, if you're in the chat box, if you're watching, joining us online, please do say your name and where you're from. I hear word that we're going to have people, of course, we always have people internationally here. And I'm joining you, Sue, today. I don't know if you know, I'm actually in Barcelona right now. So
Hey,
um, this is
that's great.
this is not my office, not my home,
No, I thought you'd
but you see in the
redecorated it
background.
actually.
I
Yeah,
know,
they're
right?
pretty spiffy there. The gold doors. I like the gold doors. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so we're so happy, excited to have you here with us, Sue. I'm talking about the science of relationships, the science, really what kind of attachment brings to us in EFT and what we've learned from EFT, especially what you've learned from EFT. But as we get rolling into it, I just want to say that we've got folks here from Canada, and Pennsylvania, and Idaho, and New York, and Norway, and Iran, and Colorado, and Miami, and Dallas, South Africa. Oh my goodness, Slovenia. It's just so
Whoa.
exciting to have the really worldwide presence here joining us for this, Sue, to hear on this conversation. So very exciting to um, be able to address all of you who are coming in from so many different places. So, Sue, I was just wondering that maybe a good place to start would be if you shared with us a little bit about your journey into. I mean, we all want to know about attachment theory and specifics around, secure and insecure and what that looks like. But this has been a process of discovery for you across your career. And speaking of your career, congratulations also on your recent induction into the Canadian honor that you've had.
Thank you. Yes, I think it says
So,
something. I think it says something interesting that when my colleagues told me that they had submitted my name for the Order of Canada, which is a very big deal in Canada. It's a huge honor. What I said, what I think is interesting for all of us, is I laughed and said, don't be silly. Psychologists, especially psychologists who are obsessed with relationships, don't get that kind of recognition. And I think it's interesting, and it says something about where we are, that a psychologist who's obsessed with relationships and specifically with attachment did get that kind of recognition. So, are you hearing me,
it's really
Becca?
fantastic.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's
It is.
really
It is.
fantastic that there's so much acknowledgement to you,
But,
to the work, and that recognition can help so much awareness around the importance of this message.
and I think it's part of us. Um, it's kind of like what I see as part of our journey is that it's bigger than therapy. I think it's really about, for the first time ever in human history, understanding and honoring um, our relationships and seeing how we are our relationships. We that's where we develop our sense of self. That's where we live. That's what decides whether we live and die. We're our relationships. And this new science is teaching us to honor our relationships, to understand them, to work, and I hope to understand that we can deliberately foster them, grow them, and make them work in our society. And it's pretty important because seems to be a whole slice of our world that is actually marginalizing relationships, saying they don't really matter. They're not that important. In fact, they get in the way of your freedom. That really we were in love with independence and separateness and detachment, and in the Western world. And so I think this new way of thinking about relationships and the science is incredibly important for us as cultures, not just as therapists and in with our clients, but in terms of citizens and the kind of world we want to build.
It's so important what you're saying about really how far we've come, because the pendulum had went so far to independence, went way too far, and that we're hopefully coming back. There's a slice that's still not with us yet,
Maybe.
but how, yeah, maybe, hopefully we can come back, right?
Maybe. There's still this, in fact, you sent me some questions, and I think there was one on there about differentiation. And, our field for a long time was in love with the idea that closeness was a problem. Closeness was part of the problem in unhappy couples and families. And what people needed was more separateness. And this was somehow defining yourself as not with the other, not in the context of the other, was what was important. And, of course, those things are important. But what the new science says is real freedom, real strong sense of self, real resilient sense of self, real flexibility and the ability to grow comes with other people out of secure relationships, not out of always having cast iron boundaries and putting people on the other side and always totally defining yourself in your own head. That's a mistake that our field made, and I think our culture is still actually making, right?
So how attachment fits into differentiation is that, in a nugget, how you often say it is, it's two sides of the same coin. If the more securely attached you are, the more differentiated you can be. And we've tried to separate differentiation out away from other.
Yes.
And it doesn't work.
Like we've taken it out of context. And I think it's important for people to get where that came from in our profession. When Bowen was looking at schizophrenic families, it was at a time when the overwhelming way of thinking that we had in this field was that the bottom line is that kids were too close to their mothers, that mothers were the problem, that mothers were too intrusive, and that the kid had to be able to separate from the mother. And if the kid could separate from the mother, everything would be fine. Basically, women were the problem. We're nearly always the problem, actually. But
That's right.
Women were the problem. Yeah. So hopefully this has changed. And we differentiate with people, not from people. The people who have the most flexible, clear sense of self, who can assert themselves, who can define who they are, who can think for themselves, are people who have had secure attachments, who know that when they're separate, that doesn't mean they're isolated. It means they can go out into the world and be separate, and they can still turn and call and have people they love come to them. This is a different level of differentiation that, Bowen didn't understand. Why would he? He hasn't got what we've got, which is the privilege of, 50 years of attachment science and, 20 years of adult attachment. He didn't have the privilege of tuning into that. So it's an interesting one. But you still get people who see attachment as somehow confining or constraining, or as somehow just for children, or somehow threatening the independence and the freedom that we all want. And I don't think that's true, actually. It's not a threat. It's two sides of the same coin.
Okay, yeah, that's so important to understand, because especially as EFT therapists, we see that over and over again. The more the couple develops security, the more easily they can become who they really are and share more of themselves.
And assert themselves and know what they need and ask the other person for what they need, right? Which is sort of the essence of differentiation.
Yeah, that's right. So let's turn to another question, which is the treatment of attachment disorders and issues. And we're largely doing it in the realm of couple therapy, but we also, individual and family therapy, it's so important, that the treatment of attachment disorders.
Yeah.
Interesting, because we would say it a little bit differently. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a tricky, because, there is one way of thinking about attachment disorders, which is children who have never experienced any secure attachment and who now are protective of themselves and cannot respond to caregiving. And that is being called an attachment disorder in children. And that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about couple and family therapy, usually in family therapy. What we're talking about is that people don't know how to tune into the attachment channel. The attachment signals become distorted. The fears of isolation and abandonment and rejection kind of become front and center, and need a huge amount of energy to regulate those fears. People don't know how to talk about their needs. They don't know how to reach for each other. When they are responded to, they don't know how to take it in. These are all things that you see. This is not just in research you can see this. You can see this in your regular couple therapy. You can see this. Why does one person, I'm thinking about my own relationship here. Why do I say to my husband when he says, I need to go hiking in the mountains for a week? Why do I say, jolly good, have a good time? when I walk into a couple session and the partner basically says, I want to go away for a weekend with my girlfriends, and the male partner goes completely wild and says, basically, there you are, you see, I knew that proves that you don't care about me, and you've never cared about me, and nobody's ever cared about me. You see it in couples therapy, this sensitivity to the danger, the threat of rejection and abandonment, and isolation. You see it in couples therapy when people don't know how to formulate their needs. They don't know how to give clear signals to each other. They don't say, I'm scared. I feel like what I hear when you say you're leaving for the weekend is that I'm not important to you, or that you're not going to miss me. And somehow that makes me scared. They can't say that. They say, you're a bad wife, you shouldn't go, I'm not going to let you go. The signals get garbled. Then when the wife starts to understand the man's vulnerability and, where this comes from, but that he does have this sensitivity, and tries actually to respond to him, he doesn't trust her. He doesn't take it in. He says, you're just saying that because the therapist told you to say it. You don't really care about me. And people are also ashamed of their attachment needs. A man like that will say, he's ashamed that he minds so much that his wife's going away for the weekend. So if you understand this in an attachment frame, it's all perfectly understandable and workable. And that's really the main message that I think is so hopeful about attachment science. It renders so many things in couple and family therapy and in individual therapy for things like depression and anxiety. It renders them perfectly rational and understandable and perfectly workable. Whereas before, we would not understand people's sensitivities. We would not understand how they couldn't communicate with their partners. We'd try to give them all kinds of communication skills training, and then we wouldn't understand why that wouldn't work either. Doing communication skills training when you're struggling with an emotional hurricane inside. Well, it's actually, there's a hurricane hitting the US right now, so it would be a bit like getting in your sailboat with your little communication skills sailboat and trying to sail through Irma, right? It's not going to work, right? You have to help people make sense of those emotions. You have to help people regulate those emotions before they can begin to express them in a way that their partner can hear and that will start a bonding conversation, which is kind of what I think what does EFT do that's unique and special? I think one of the main things we do is we know how to see attachment in action. We know how to understand the traumatizing effect of isolation and fear. And we know how to create bonding conversations that create more secure bonds. And that is, I feel very good when I say that. That's real good because it's not that long ago that we didn't know any of those things really. So we've come a long way. And I think attachment has been the two sort of pillars of EFT are understanding and working with emotion and actually using it to create change, not just calming it down or controlling it, using it to create change and understanding things from an attachment point of view, putting things in a developmental personality context, and a context where you look at the self and the system. It's a relational theory, but it's also talks to us about how the individual is structured, right? So emotion and attachment, those two, studying them and looking at them in therapy and looking at the research, and they've taken us a long way. And I hope they're gonna take us even further.
Yeah, hopefully it will take us and bring in many, many more therapists to be able to use attachment as a base. So, Sue, the science has grown so much. The study of attachment, the research, along with the research of EFT, but if we're thinking just about attachment, you've seen it really develop, and you've been a big part of helping it develop and utilizing it in a therapeutic way rather than a research, social psychologist sort of a way. What have been some of the big milestones for you in your kind of light bulb moments around attachment?
Well, I mean, I think I talk a lot. I talk in Hold Me Tight and in other places about how we did the first study of EFT, and I was amazed that it worked the way it did. I couldn't believe it. I ran the stats 3 times, but that I didn't really know. I knew that it was good for people to talk about their softer feelings and respond to them. I knew that. But I didn't really have a theoretical base of what we were doing. And I talk a lot about how I went to a conference and had this sort of blinding insight that this was all about bonding. This was John Bowlby. This was the same. This was the adult version of John Bowlby's attachment experience. So I've talked about that a lot. But I think, and you remember these moments, and I think that's interesting when we're thinking about therapy. There's a man called Paveza who said, we do not remember days, we remember moments. And I think that's very interesting because what we try to do in EFT is create seminal transforming moments that people can take with them out into therapy and that are so significant. They stay in their memory and they shape the days to come. So I remember that moment. But of course, there were hundreds of moments in the years after that when I would be at the big hospital in town doing a family assessment, when I would be seeing an individual adolescent who was suicidal, wouldn't eat and wouldn't talk to anybody, including me, which was a bit difficult if you're going to do therapy. So, or when I was seeing a couple with, I was thinking back on those days on the weekend, and like we would get couples who, if you put their joint diagnoses together, the both of the partners, you'd have long lists of all these diagnoses they all had, and we would look at them in despair. And what I remember is that there were hundreds of smaller moments when I'd watch an assessment behind the mirror at the hospital, and the case would seem huge and just too complicated and multifaceted, and everyone would look at the file and we'd all sigh and we'd all go, oh no, what on earth are we going to do with these people? She's eating disordered, she's depressed, she's got a PTSD diagnosis, she's borderline, somebody thinks she's bipolar, and it would go on and on. Then you'd get them in the room and you'd watch. And what would happen to me anyway is after about 5 minutes, I'd say, oh, this is just an attachment drama. It's a bit stuck. It's loaded with all kinds of terrible sensitivity to threat that comes from the past, but it's an attachment drama. Oh, well, that's okay, because then we know sort of how to work with it. We're going to, help people tune into their emotions, understand them, help them tune into each other, create more safety. And then we're going to give them experiences that Bowlby said years ago shifts their sense of self and sense of other into safety and confidence and competence. And, I wouldn't say all this in my head, but you get the idea. It would turn these cases, whether they were individual or family or couple, into something manageable, describable, workable. And so as time went on, I just became more and more passionate about this point of view. And that was at a point when it was not a popular point of view to talk about adult attachment at all. It wasn't even popular in the family therapy field to talk about child attachment particularly. Everybody was into hierarchy, boundaries, differentiation, narrative, doing clever new interventions that shifted alliances. Virginia Satir, that, her people came along and said, yes, it's a good idea to talk about emotion. And then John Gottman came along and said, hey, I can predict whether people divorce by looking at the emotion on their faces. But, we got lost there. And I kept experiencing that emotion. If you focused on the emotion and it took you into attachment, the attachment perspective just kept giving you a road home. It just kept giving you this clarity, this way of seeing. And it's fascinating. It's because we can get kind of extreme about it when we think we found the answer. Somebody asked me in an externship a few years ago, when isn't it about attachment? And I thought that was a good question, actually. But my answer was an honest answer. I said, it's always about attachment. There's never, tell me something that isn't about attachment, and of course that's because I've got my attachment glasses on. But I said, well, if it's not about attachment, the couple aren't really distressed. They come in and they say, please help us discuss where to go on holiday or how to parent our children. And they're basically a relatively happy couple who just want some advice. Maybe their mother's a therapist. She said, go for therapy. Or, if it's not about, at the point where somebody's a paranoid schizophrenic, it's not about, it's about so much more than attachment that you can't just use the frame we're talking about here. But if you look at ordinary people in the world fighting depression and anxiety, and in our recent research, even fighting heart disease, we can talk about that a bit in a minute if you like, because we're taking this stuff into the medical world. If you look at ordinary people fighting the battles they fight, attachment is always in there because it's part of the structure of who we are. It's who we are. And when we feel lovable as human beings, feel acceptable and accepted, and when we trust others and can call to them to help us when we're vulnerable and take in their care, then we deal with everything better. That's called a resilient human being. So I think,
Sue, I mean, let's zoom in a little bit. So we've got the broad
okay,
perspective and how it is this whole base. Let's see if we can go, a little specific around some things, because we have some questions coming in. Like Donna says, what's your experience with a disengaged partner who goes to, I don't know, and shuts down in session? And someone else asks about, our stance with a different attachment style. Therapeutically, do we kind of take a different stance with a withdrawer than a pursuer? So there's a couple of questions coming in around, really working
so
specifically with.
I think that's they're good questions. The point is, I think about disengagement, what attachment tells us, because it tells us so much about emotion. What attachment tells us is that disengagement is hard work. Disengagement is basically blocking your engagement with the universe, and we know from the emotion research that suppressing emotion is amazingly hard work. It stresses you out, basically, so it creates a rebound effect because you can't keep doing it. It literally takes too much cortisol, too much glucose going to your brain. Okay, so I always remember that when I'm working with disengaged couples. And the other thing about that is I know what they're disengaged from. So all I've got to do is tweak it. It's like I have an understanding of where people are at emotionally. So when somebody says, I say, how do you feel when your partner says they're going to divorce you? And the man, and I've been watching his face at the beginning of therapy, and he's got lots of emotions going on. He's not all numbed out, and he hasn't left the relationship. He says to me, I don't care. All I've got to do is, if I know what's there, he's a human being. He's got to be threatened by that unless he's left the relationship. Okay. So he's threatened. He's a human being. He's got to be threatened. That's just the way he's structured. If he's not a lizard, he's not dead, he's threatened. Okay. So I know what's there. So all I do is I go in and I keep triggering it. So I have to be soft as well, because what the good EFT therapist knows how to do is regulate emotion at the same time as evoking. And that is the art of therapy in a nutshell, I think. All good therapists know how to do that. We do it very deliberately. So I'll say, sorry, could you help me? Could you help me? I'm soft, right? I say, your wife just turned and said, here comes the trigger, buddy. You better get all your glucose going to your brain because you're going to need it to block this out. And your wife just said that she's going to divorce you. She's going to divorce you. She's going to walk away. You're going to lose her. She's going to divorce you. She's going this dream that you had, that you talked about, at the beginning of the section of this relationship, is going to die. And right here, right now, when she says it, you say you don't feel anything. You help me. You feel nothing. How'd you do that? I go into the process. We go into process in EFT. If you stay with the content, you're stuck. If you go into the process, how'd you do that? You're a human being. You're an attachment human being. How'd you do that? And it shifts. People can't keep it up. They really can't. Actually, I've done a little private experiment for myself. Sometimes I talk about it at externships where I've sort of counted what is the most withdrawn, difficult, angry, oppositional client can do this. How many times do I have to trigger? And I've come up with 5. People
So
can't
you
do it.
talk about talk to them, like you
5, like
ask them
trigger it
about their
again.
experience and
I
they
reflect.
block you.
Yeah, I reflect. I stay with it. I'm soft and safe, but I reflect. I trigger it again, right? And I prime the isolation, the threat, what's going on. I prime their longing. You talked about this dream you had. Now you have to let go of it. I prime it. I prime it. I prime it 5 times. And well, one day I'm going to meet an Olympic disengager, but that's the most I've ever found, 5 times. But if people, we don't stay there. That's the thing.
2 or 3 is kind of average, right? To ask
Yeah.
and then pop out. And you're describing. You've told me you like this, so I'm gonna mention it because what you've described is what I've put an acronym around called RAVE, where you reflect, you communicate acceptance. So you enter with all the soft and warm, you validate their position, and then you ping them again. You go back to the emotional response. So there's that stance kind of that you're taking with, and you 5 times, even the very most in front of you, Sue, that's that they can do that 5 times, and
Somebody
and
years
then
ago.
and then it's just too much work to block out the emotion.
That's right. And they don't have to block it, because the other thing I'm doing is being safe. So that's the other
Right.
thing. It's a push me pull. I'm pulling because I've got the safe. I'm saying I can help you with this threat, right? But at the same time, I'm bringing it up. Somebody years ago, I don't know who it was, some famous therapist said that really good therapy is holding people very gently, gently in your hands, soothing them, and then smacking them in the mouth. And then holding them. Well, it's a bit of an unfortunate image, but the smack is, you bring up what they're afraid of. You bring up the ghost. You bring up the threat. But this time
You help
you're
them face
here.
it.
They can take it in, accept it. Their relationship with the threat changes because you're there with them. You can help them deal with it, and their ability to deal with threat changes. It moves in a new way, right? And by the way, what we're talking about is true of individual, couple, or family therapy. It's true, right? It's sometimes family's a bit different. I play in family therapy. I think more. That's one of the reasons I like it. I play with the last family I saw. I played with Jacob. He said, "I don't want to be here." And I said, "Well, it's Friday. I don't want to be here either, really. I want to be, I want to be going up to my cottage." And he laughed and I laughed. So I play. But because I play with him, I play till he accepts me as a playmate. And then we do the same thing, but you have to do it delicately with an 11-year-old Jacob. But he still gets to the same place where instead of being enraged at his father, threatening to kill him, how come I think, was it it was the end of the first session or towards the beginning of the second, he turns and basically, says, reaches for his father, and his father freezes. And that's the essence of what's going on in that family. And that's the essence of where Jacob gets stuck feeling bad about himself. He says, my father, he says, you don't want me as a son. I'm not the son you want. So I'm not going to listen to you. And I'm going to kill you in the middle of the night. And I'm going to show you that you can't hurt me this way. And so I help him talk about his anger. Everyone's done all kinds of things. They've done behavior management. They've given him drugs. They've given the parents parenting skills. None of it's working. What's got to shift is it's to know a good EFT therapist knows how to change channels and move from the behavior and the symptoms into the attachment channel and into the emotions. When you go there with him, this kid is amazingly articulate. He's able to tell his father, I'm opposing you because you're the enemy, because you never open up to me and give me what I'm dying for, which is your approval, your caring, safety. This is the same drama as we see in couples. It's the same drama as when I sit in my office, as I did a few months ago, and work with this woman whose anxiety and depression scores are through the roof, and who talks to me about the fact that her ex-husband, who she still adores, wants to get back with her, but she's paralyzed. She can't do anything because she knows deep inside that she's deeply unlovable, deeply unworthy, that that if he really saw her, he wouldn't want her. That that she has to stay separate. So where does that come from? It comes from all the attachment dramas in her life. It comes from her father. It comes from what she tells herself, which she's learned from her father. It comes from her relationship with her sister. And we can play with all those because if you're an adult, all these people are captured in representations and you can bring them into therapy. So Jacob tells his father, I hate you because you don't give me love. And, Gwen sits in the session and closes her eyes and tells her older sister, you know, you always tell me that I'm garbage. You always tell me that I'm nobody wants me in the family. You always tell me. And I'm so scared you're right. I'm so scared you're right. So I can't stand up to you because I'm scared you're right. And I go away and I say to myself, she's right. And then I have to hide from everyone. It's all attachment. It's all about attachment. So that's why I said to that lady that day, tell me when it isn't about attachment. This is who we are as human beings. Yeah. This is the basic drama we're all caught up in.
I love it when I heard Jim Cohen say, you know, people need people like fish need water. We need that connection so much. So we have a
And
question. Go ahead. Then I'll tell you another
it's
question.
specific. It's specific. It's not just we need social support. It's not just we
No,
need to
right.
belong. Mnuchin said people need to belong, but he didn't mean what I mean when I talk about attachment. It's very specific here. We mean you have to have a felt sense inside of you that when you call, you matter to someone and they will come. And that changes the whole universe from an isolating, hostile, terrifying place to a place where you can play and where the sun comes out.
That's right. And that you can feel the presence of another. You can feel that connection. We can feel that internalization of each other's empathy. It's just so important. Um, so so this question, Sue, is um, from Sinsin. If two people get married because of their needs for financial security, but there's no sexual attraction, can deepening the attachment bonds lead to sexual desire for each partner?
That's an interesting. Um, I think that's tricky because I think it depends on the partners and how open they are. I mean, if you got married because you had no choice and you resent that and you resent your partner, I'm not sure you could deepen the attachment. um, but if the two people were open to each other and they learn how to talk to each other about their needs and their longings, and when they are able to do that, the other responds, I think that's called falling in love, isn't it?
It is.
And
It
I
is
think
called.
that
We
kind
start to
of
take risks with each
emotion,
other. Yeah.
yeah, I think that kind of emotional connection brings sexuality with it. There's a lot of research that says that we've got sexuality because we looked at it in isolation from relationships, that we've got it wrong. And that the old sexual model, which always starts with desire and lust, is off a lot of the time, not just for women, but also for men. That, often it doesn't quite start that way. It starts with an interaction and with some sort of connection happening. It starts with, this relationship. It starts with your body responding to the other person because the other person is emotionally present and there for you. And you are wired to respond to that as an attachment being. And then when you start to respond, your body, you interpret those arousal cues as sexuality, and the other person suddenly starts to become an object of lust. So we're looking, and I talk about that in all the writings we've done on sexuality recently. I talk about it in the talk on my website that I gave to the networker about 18 months ago on sexuality and attachment. This is the way we understand attachment is changing everything. It's changing our sense of sexuality too. So you don't know if two
Your
people
TEDx
can fall in love.
too, I think you addressed that in your TEDx talk as well. People want to refer to other things that they can hear you talking about it on. How the emotional bond influences the sexual relationship. So yeah, there's more and more about that. So we
I'm
certainly
looking at
think
all these
it's
questions. They're great questions, and
I
but
know,
we would be
great
here
question.
forever. We would be here forever and ever.
That's right. Um, so let's see. So there's some interest in knowing from some questions that came in earlier, as well as I see some here in the chat box, about your experiences, as you in the therapy room. And I think it dovetails really nicely into this question about how do you become an EFT therapist? What's kind of the best route to go? Because there's something also about being ourselves in the therapy room as we're learning. So I don't know if you can address both of those. Are kind of two separate questions, but they seem to kind of fit together.
Well, this model is an interesting model in that it requires that you be real and present and be yourself in the therapy room. And that again is at odds with lots of our professions, dictates these days, because I look at my own profession of psychology and it feels to me like the zeitgeist out there is that psychologists are distant experts who tell people what to do and who just implement sort of technologies, treatments, from a manual. They're sort of consultants and they're in a professional role where they always know better and more than their client. And we don't take that stance in EFT. We take a Rogerian stance where you are who you are and you are real. And that doesn't mean you don't have expertise and a vision that your client doesn't have, but it means that you respect your client and your client's experience and you're curious about that and you can learn from your client. If I didn't learn from my clients, I'd have given up therapy a long time ago. Part of the joy of therapy for me is I'm always surprised and I'm always curious. I expect somebody to say something and they don't say it. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, how do you get from here to there? Like, wow, and so curiosity and respect and attuning to people. And
So
that
Sue,
means being real in the session.
I can remember this moment for me that I don't know, if it's actually the same for you or not, because I interpreted something that you did as I was watching you. When you were filming, I think I got to be in the room with you when you were filming the Matt and Rhea tape. And it was the first time that I got to see you face on working with a couple. At that time, a lot of our training tapes were mostly on the couple. I don't remember seeing that much of you face on. And I don't know if that's true, but I just remember
No,
this
it
odd
isn't
kind
true,
of.
but never mind. Keep going because
It's
it's
not true.
interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's right. It always switched to you, didn't it? Um, so I saw this. I saw you say something like it's something you commonly do where you say, hold on, that's important. Hold on, or something just happened here. Can we slow down, or can we hold on? You often start it with something like something just happened, and I saw this look on your face when you said that.
I can't hear.
Oh, something just
Yeah, just
happened.
you have to. Something happened. So what did I do that you're not used to?
No, so when I saw the look on your face, what I interpreted was that the something that just happened was you went, oh, or like, how did they get from here to there? That thing that you're
Yeah.
just describing right now. And that you used that to slow down, you used that for curiosity, but it was actually something that surprised you, or, you know, what's like something that happened inside for you?
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's something spontaneous about this kind of therapy where you go and you tune into people and you track their emotions and the way they dance with their partners. There's something alive and spontaneous about it. And for some people, they won't like that because somehow they want everything set down in manuals. They want a set sequence of intervention. But this is more like dancing tango, you know, and you know how to dance tango. Um, but, you know, every tango's different actually, and every tune's different, even if you've heard it before. And your body's different, your partner's body's different, you're interpreting the music differently. And so to really be able to dance tango, you have to be present, not off in your head, thinking about the way things should be, but reacting in the moment. And I think that's part of the challenge of EFT, but it's because it's real and enlivening for you and for the people who are doing it. You know, I knew about emotionally focused family therapy and how to work with kids before I went in and worked with Jacob. On another level, I hadn't worked with a family for a few years when I went into the consult with Jacob at the hospital. And so when I went in there, there was a level at which I was just Sue meeting Jacob. And I liked him. Okay. I really liked him. He was wild. I mean, you could see him say things to freak his parents out. And there was some part of me loved that about him. He was so good at it. You know, they'd act like they had it all together, and he'd find something to say that would just completely put his parents on the edge of a cliff. And I thought, oh, he's not just angry at them. He's really bright and he's so good. He just walks into the room and threatens them, you know, with a little bell like, see this? I'm going to scare the hell out of you. See, I might commit suicide. I might dash out into the road and go under a bus. And that might be because you're a bad parent. And you could just see him playing with his parents' emotions. And his parents were like deer in the headlights. You know, they were like stuck, they were way behind the 8 ball. This kid was just moving like crazy. So I thought, okay, I'll move with him. So, you know, we start to play. And then before you know where we are, I'm tuned into his pain. And so there's something real about that. What I'm really saying is the gift of attachment is it gives you the structure of that drama and those emotions so that then you can go in and play. And that allows you to be with different kinds of people, with pursuers, with growers, you know, with
You're describing a lot of, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but you're describing a lot of flexibility around being able to see it, be surprised, go in, go play, whatever. And so there's a question here about from Sandra. Do we as therapists need to be securely attached as a person in order to be a good EFT therapist? It's a question that we hear.
I don't think, well, first of all, don't forget secure attachment is on a continuum. It's not you're not in or out. It's on a continuum. So that any time in our lives, we'll have a continuum of attachment, right? Secure or otherwise. So, but so when nobody's totally securely attached, nobody's totally insecure. It depends on the relationship, the moment, the person, you know, your experience last week, right? But at the same time, I think the answer is no, in that I know some very good therapists that I've trained here in Ottawa who would say things to me like, well, I don't know how to tell you this. I feel rather I shouldn't tell you, but I'm an avoidant. And I said, you know, but the very fact that this person can say that to me means they're aware. It means that they've looked at their attachment, they've looked at their emotions, they're aware of their inherent, their habitual responses and their habitual ways of dealing with their emotions. That's what you need to be a good EFT therapist, not to be always on this continuum of secure. However, I do think that when we're hit with a tsunami of insecurity, like when we've just lost somebody or when our own marriage is falling apart or something, and we're in emotional chaos, then we have to get our balance back a little bit before we can go in and help somebody else find their way home. That's not the time to, to go and walk with somebody in the forest of their emotions when you're still lost. So that's true.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you have to be yourself and aware and willing to attune and to do EFT. That's what you have to be.
I think about it as being secure with the model, kind of being able to
Well, that's the other thing. My
hold on
safe
to
haven.
while
Yeah,
I'm in therapy. That's my therapeutic identity, is being able to be secure with the model and using it, the guideposts, using the map, and feeling safety in that structure.
yeah, yeah. I think that's true. I know for me, I feel like I'm still growing as a therapist. I feel like I'm still learning. I hope that never stops. I hope if I do therapy on the day before I die, I'll say, wow, that was a great session. I wonder what would happen if I did this. I mean, I hope that's still true, right? But for sure, um, I would say in the last 15 years or so, having this model and having the attachment grow and, having incredible studies out there and having all these people helping us understand attachment more and more, this gives me a safe haven, secure base of therapy that I can play. Then I can play because, I'm not scared that somebody's going to present me with something I don't understand and I can't make sense of. I'm not scared I'm going to get overwhelmed by all their things they're telling me, because I know how to sift it into this basic drama of emotional connection and disconnection. And I use the attachment model and my skills in EFT as a safe haven, secure base. So that means that therapy becomes fun. It becomes
Yes.
a learning, exercise for me. It becomes an adventure, a safe adventure, right? Where instead of a pressure to produce some enormous solution all the time, I think that's the other thing that we feel as therapists. We feel that we've got to produce easy, quick solutions to enormously complex life problems. And what EFT says is just stay with the process. You don't have to come up with solutions. You stay with the process. What happens to you when you're afraid? What do you do with that? What do you say to yourself? Let's look at that. How are you feeling now? Let me join you in your fear. You stay with the process. Then you don't have to be the brilliant guru who constantly comes up with an answer to every question. If I felt that kind of pressure, I think I'd burn out as a therapist in a year.
It'd be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, the process helps so much, and the present, being in the present as well. But I don't want to diverge too much, so because I have a question here from, let's see if I can find it, Munire from Iran. I probably didn't say that quite right. Has this question, Rosa writes it, and says, why are men usually the pursuers? Does it have anything to do, in Iran, does it have anything to do with their childhood?
I don't think men are usually the pursuers, not in the West. Men pursue usually for sexuality, because that's got to do. Women usually pursue for emotional connection because they want to feel safer in the relationship. But, your habitual is kind of what you've learned to do. So it's always about your past experience on one level, but it's it's also about the present context. Because people are flexible and they can learn. And if you are a withdrawer, you're a withdrawn woman, and then you're lucky enough to fall in love with a very responsive, loving man, you learn to come out of yourself, and you learn to talk about your emotions, and you learn to ask what you need, and that withdrawal changes, right? What Bowlby says is that we develop working models, self and other, from the relationships we have. And I want you to focus on the working. People have focused on the model, but it's about working. What Bowlby's implying is they're in flux. Oh, my silly phone, sorry. Bowlby's in Bowlby's implying that they're, that a good working model is flexible. It responds to the environment. It's not just from the past. So it's what you've learned to do in the past, and it's also how you experience the present. The trouble is we see people who are stuck in relationships where they have past fears and past rigid ways of dealing with their emotions, past rigid expectations. And they're in relationships where present interactions constantly confirm those past fears and experiences. So they're stuck. There's no way out. And what we do is we create experiences that shift them, give them a new vision, a new experience, take them out of that past experience, and teach them how to give each other a new corrective emotional experience. And then their working models can change and their positions can change. Pursuers cannot be so pursuing, withdrawers cannot be so withdrawn. If you look at a flexible, relatively secure couple, there'll be times when one withdraws and one pursues. It all depends, but nobody's stuck in that rigid role. They can shift, right? That's a good relationship. It's fluid, it's flexible.
Thank you. So we're getting really close here to wrapping up, Sue, and you're going to be talking a little bit about this, of course, and not in a conversational way as much at the EFT Summit coming up. And I don't know if anyone here is going, but I wanted to ask you to say if you are. And then also wanted to let people know that today is the last day to get the early bird discount. So those of you that are on live here, we want to remind you that that discount is ending today. So I'm going to load that up so you can go directly there if you want to attend the summit with the discount. And anything, Sue, just as you think about, how we rely on attachment, maybe things that are, of course, all of your things are so helpful to read, and the transcripts are so helpful to read to start to get the attachment sense. And we've got lots of people saying that they're coming, which is really cool. And so let's just maybe finish with one question around softening. Actually, there was this working model question that came in beforehand. Do you remember it? About how we work with the internal working model, view of self and view of other in relation to attachment. And that may be too big to bite off right at this closing moment. So I probably should.
We work with working models by going in through the emotions. Like, the working models are not cognitive structures per se. They are a hugely emotionally loaded procedural map for how to deal with your emotion, how to engage with other people, whether other people are dangerous or safe. So when we work with emotion, what happens is people's image of themselves and others comes out. People's fears about others, expectations about others, people's sense of whether they are worthy and entitled to care, all comes out in their emotions. And we work with it on an emotional level and clarify it. And then we create new corrective experiences that shift those working models, those procedural maps, those ways of dealing with and regulating emotion, those cognitions that go along with the emotion. So you could say the whole of EFT is working with working models of self and other, but we're not working with them just on a cognitive level, because they're emotionally loaded. The way into those working models and the way into the implicit cognitions that structure somebody's personality is through the emotion. That's the way.
Right. Well, Sue, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and life. I know that you're working on some other great projects to help us learn EFT more and better. And there's lots of questions, so we'll try to save some of them up and make sure that we can address them at some point. Appreciate everyone, appreciate each of you for being here, joining us online and encouraging us in the chat, responding, asking questions. Very great to have you. So Sue, thanks for leading the way here.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing everyone in San Diego. It's going to be fun. We're going to tango.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see you tango and to learn a little bit more about tangoing.
Okay. Okay, take care,
Okay.
Becca.
Signing
Nice
off.
to be with you. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everyone.